Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. JAKIB guys, John McMullen Jody McDonald. As usual, on Wednesdays, we are joined by our buddy Mike Gill from the Sports Bash down the shore, 93.7. Mike, we all know what transpired on the field in Buffalo on Monday night, and we continue to send out best wishes and prayers and hoping for the recovery of Damar Hamlin. It does have an effect on every other team in the National Football League, and it has a potential effect on every fan of just the game of football, at least on the NFL level. And we wonder about how it is going to be handled going forward. Do you think this is going to have long-lasting effects on the National Football League, Mike? Do you think that we will see change in any way, shape, or form to how the game is played going forward with almost, and it is still a possibility, something as tragic as losing a life on a National Football League field?
You know, Jody, I don't know that I've actually thought of that yet, whether there'll be some changes, and I apologize for my voice. I've been under the weather the last couple of days. I'm trying to get through whatever has been going around, but that's a good question on what more they could legislate, because you watch the play, and it seems like a play that you see 100 times over in a game. So It wasn't like a violent hit or some hit that was being questioned as to why wasn't there a targeting or a penalty. I don't have targeting in the NFL, but, you know, a dangerous hit that was being questioned as to, well, why wasn't there this or that? It just seemed like a routine play that we don't know what has happened with this young man. And that's where I think the league is in a really tough spot. I mean, to me, I don't know how the Bills play this weekend without having further information on their teammate at this point. So moving forward to if the game will change, I think that'll be discussed possibly in the offseason, but I don't know what will change based on that particular play. Now, if we find out something was pre-existing and they missed it, maybe they might do some more tests on these players before. But I think we need to find out what has happened to Hamlin before any of that. And that, to me, is the biggest situation here is this guy comes first, and I don't know how that team moves on until they get any information on where he currently stands.
Yeah, and I think, you know, they have the best information. Obviously, they're connected. I do think, and you and I talked about it, this is, you know, from talking to a couple cardiologists, this has been all good news, to be honest, in the circumstance, under the circumstances. But it is interesting, and obviously his teammates are much closer to him, and Jody brought up everybody handles things differently. The closer you are to him, obviously it's going to be more and more difficult. So it is going to be a tough road to hoe for Buffalo, not only this week, but every week moving forward. I mean,
how do they?
A difficult circumstance.
How do they get back on the field and start preparing for New England this week? I mean, do they practice today? I mean, there's still been no follow-up to, I mean, I guess his uncle spoke to everybody yesterday, but that's not medical examiners following up and giving you information. Now, the team might have information that has not been out there yet, and maybe that's enough information to give them some solace to move forward here. But if their teammate is still in a Cincinnati hospital and they don't know what's happening with them, how are they on the practice field today getting ready for a game?
Yeah, it's difficult. There's no doubt. And Buffalo has a much more difficult decision than even other teams. I mean, everybody's been affected. You know, we talk about the brotherhood of this game, and you see it on social media with players all over, sort of putting aside any kind of rivalry or things like that, because these guys know how violent this game is and everybody's a play away. I talked about, you know, we had a scary situation at Lincoln Financial Field with Josh Sweat. You know, that's really difficult and to get back in that game and get your head in that game and finish that game. So everybody's a little different, but there's no doubt that Buffalo has a bigger issue than anybody else. And it is going to be interesting to see because there's no evidence that the NFL is going to stop week 18. There might be some talk about pushing the playoffs back. People have thrown that out because you have the extra week. We'll see how that all shakes out. But for the future, you bring up something interesting. And I was on the field when Corey Stringer passed. It was a practice, so it was a little bit different. And that changed the NFL in dramatic ways. It was literally the demarcation line from the old school to the new school. And the NFL mandated water breaks and things of that. For those people who don't know, Corey died of dehydration. Back then, Mike Tyson was, one of the greatest guys in the world, was his coach at the time, and would often, Corey was a little bit overweight, was a great player, but that was what you did, and said, you would push the players and push the players and push the players. And there was this toughness factor, legendary stories of Bear Bryant. You had no water at practice. I tell people this, Mike, and people don't believe me, and this was 100% true. They didn't let us reporters bring water on the field in those days. Now everybody's encouraged, drink, keep hydrated, and that's not that long ago.
No.
So,
well,
as far as sorry, I'm going a little bit too long, and I'll let you jump in. As far as better tests to make sure these guys don't have pre-existing conditions, that might be a thing. I don't know how much you can do. We see this hit 30 times a game, this type of hit. It was just horrible. It was just horrible.
Yeah, and just to, there's no precedent for what we saw. I'm going back to, heck, when I got my start, I was interning for Jody Mack. They're doing their show at Lehigh 2-a-days. I mean, they do the morning show with WIP, and then the shows would be there all day waiting for the second practice to come around. And, you never saw anything like this. So I don't know if this is something from the violence of the sport more so than this was just a complete anomaly that we hope to find out what happens with this young man. And, I thought when Joe Buck, I don't know how many people zone in on Monday Night Football, but the games have not been great. And Buck has been kind of shooting at the hip this year, a little having a little fun out there because these games have not been great. To see how locked in and somber he was in that moment and all the big games and big moments that he has been a part of, he was witnessing something that he had truly never saw before. And that was a pretty jarring moment when you were watching that. Hey, here's a guy who's having fun this year. He's got a new job. It's Monday night. The games haven't been great. I'm with my guy. And that moment shook him a little bit. I think that was evident.
And that's the ironic part about it. If it had been a usual Monday night matchup, then we wouldn't be talking about how the NFL is going to handle this going forward. It would have been, oops, they're just going to play one less game. If it was the Texans against the Raiders, which have no playoff implications whatsoever. Yay, sorry, we're not going to finish this one.
Well,
you get a refund for your tickets if you were at the game.
And Jody, I wonder if this happened at Sunday at 1:00 in just in the mess of all the other games, while it was a regional game maybe, and not everybody saw what happened. What if there would be any different reaction or anything? But because keep in mind, this game is on the Rose Bowl's leading into this game. It's the biggest Monday Night Football game they've had all year. It's probably the biggest audience they had for a football game in quite some time on ESPN. So therefore, this was universally, watched by every football fan out there, college fans, NFL
and I think it was
fans.
on ABC as well.
It wasn't even on,
and it was on ESPN too.
Yeah,
it was on both ESPNs as well because, as this is happening, I'm saying, is the Manning cast on tonight? Because I thought that would have been a weird situation to have the Manning cast on for. So I flipped to 2, and the game was on there. And you're right, ABC was on, and so this was
so it's even a larger audience, even though most people have kids, but some don't. And broadcast networks, traditional, you have the biggest audience possible, and that's why they put the game on ABC. So, yeah, a lot of complications for the NFL, tons of complications for Buffalo, less for the Eagles, but we'll get it back to the Eagles because we are Birds 365. There are complications for the Eagles, Mike, especially if you push back the playoffs a week. Now, it's still key for the Eagles to get that first round bye. They'll still have the advantage if they secure it. Maybe the extra time helps. Jody and I were talking, somebody like CJ Gardner-Johnson, especially. But man, Jalen Hurts is got to go this week if he can go. I mean, everything's about medical clearance. Is he cleared for contact? But everything, all the documentation say this was a 2 to 3 week injury as a grade 2 sprain. That seems to be how things have unfolded. So he's right on the cusp. I don't know if it helps Jalen Hurts that much because he's got to play this week. And even if they push things back, it's not going to affect him because the Eagles need him.
Yeah, Jalen's in a really tough spot. I mean, obviously the team kind of needs him right now after what you saw last week. I think the panic button was pushed a little bit. There is some precedence for this, though. In 2017, they did not play very well down the stretch. I mean, quite frankly, they looked poor in a game. They played the Raiders. I think it was an ugly win. They played that game against Dallas. I think they lost like 6-0 or something to that. So they didn't exactly go into the playoffs guns a-blazing that year with Nick Foles playing quarterback. And then all of a sudden, right, they got to the playoff. They had a week off, and then they ended up playing Atlanta, and, the rest is history. So as much as we try to figure out things, if Jalen Hurts plays, I think it's because he's healthy. I mean, it's because he's ready to go. I don't think they're going to take any chances and just throw him out there if they thought there was a possibility that him getting hurt in that game because of that injury could preclude him from playing in the playoffs. So I think if you see him, it's because they think he's healthy enough to play. And then I think the other guys, you mentioned Chauncey Gardner, they have not opened the practice window on him. That gives Lane Johnson extra time to kind of get himself together. So obviously, I think this Eagles team, with where their injuries have occurred, if the NFL was to make that decision, it would probably be a help to them more so than some of these other teams who suffered injuries throughout the year. And this is why I always talk about what your record is sometimes is not really indicative of what happened in your season, because of where your injuries occurred, what happened at that time. Who's on the field when those playoffs start is the most important part of the puzzle.
I always say that's a win, that's a loss game. We all play it now it's May. It used to be April. It's so meaningless because you don't know who's going to be there on a particular game day, and it shifts things dramatically. But you're exactly right, Mike.
Very true. All right, so we don't even know if Jalen Hurts is going to be the Eagles quarterback. But it seems that we have a bit of a consensus that we believe he's going to play this week against the Giants. Don't know it, but believe it. How are they going to call plays for Jalen Hurts, Mike? Are they going to certainly acknowledge that he's not 100%? Do they believe that they can just run a standard, almost cookie cutter offense and be able to beat a Giant squad if the Giants are pulling some of their star defensive players off the field to protect them for the playoffs? How much does Jalen's physical fitness going into this game and whatever they're risking to put him out there, how much does that play into the play calling and the type of designs the Eagles have for this game Sunday against New York?
Yeah, I mean, only the coaching staff kind of knows where he's at. I would imagine right now he's giving them information. Hey, this is what I can and cannot do. I would probably not put this much in. But listen, again, I go back to if he plays, I think it's because he's ready to play. I don't think he's playing it 70%, and they're having to say, well, we can't throw, 10-yard outs to the right side because that's where he's having some pain. I think if he goes, it's because he's ready to handle the entire playbook. Now, the last time we saw him, he ran 17 times, and some people think that attributed to him getting injured. He could have got injured if he threw the ball 47 times, and we'd be complaining if he threw the ball 47 times. He threw the ball too many times. He took too many hits. Then he ran 17 times. Well, now he's running too many times. Well, could he hand the ball off more? Sure. Could we see a more run-heavy offense where they lean on the running backs? You could, but you could do that with Gardner Minshew, right? You could just turn around and hand the ball off with your backup quarterback. The part of the offense that was missing is where Jalen Hurts made the decision on whether I'm going to keep it, I'm going to throw it, or I'm going to hand it off. And if he's back, that's what you better see. Because if not, you might as well stick with the other guy. If you're taking one of those elements out of your offense, you might as well just stick with the other guy. Because
I got to disagree with that, Mike, because Jalen Hurts brings with him a fear from the defense. Because you don't know. There's the possibility that you're going to be running fear. Oh, Gardner could pull it down and take off with it. I wouldn't if I'm a defensive player. I wouldn't if I'm the defensive coordinator of the opposition. I'm going, yeah, go ahead. You run, Gardner. When Jalen Hurts, you at least have to give it respect. You have to play your defense because it's Jalen Hurts. And it's an unknown because he hadn't played for a couple of weeks, but he's still Jalen Hurts. So I don't think you can say that, you just let the other guy do it. No, Jalen brings respect and a fear from the other team's defense.
But now here's the problem, guys. We already saw this last season when Jalen hurt his ankle against the Giants. Now, he missed a game, and then he came back. And when he came back, there was still that fear. Now, he wasn't the player he was now, but there was still that fear. He was still a great runner, and everybody feared that aspect of the game and him pulling the football, the so-called +1. But they figured out pretty quickly, that's off the table.
Yeah.
If it's off the table, it's off the table. They might fear it early, but if you don't use it, defenses figure it out. And they kind of put that in the back pocket and say, all right, we don't have to worry about that today because he's limited and he's going to be more of a pocket passer. So I think that's the difficulty Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen have. How much do they want to protect him? Even that, how much do they have to protect him? I don't think anybody knows that.
No, and, that's a good point, John. It's that, Jody, you're right. The element of it is there, but if he's not displaying it for 2 quarters, 3 quarters of the game, then the defense is saying, all right, you're not going to do it. But if you do it, you got me. But I'm going to play it this way until you show me you're going to do it. The difference is, to me, these guys are players who got to this point by using the greatest instincts in the world. Everything when they step on that field is using their instincts. That's why, when these guys get penalized for hits and stuff like that, and people act like they did it purposely, these guys are using their instincts. They see a play, they see the ball, and they've been taught their whole lives to make a play on the ball. Jalen Hurts, when he gets on the field, he's going to use his instincts. It's not going to be, my shoulder's bad, I can't run. When the play is there to make, that's what these guys do. That's why they're the best, is they use their instincts and make the play that their instincts led them to. So I think if Hurts plays, you're going to see Jalen Hurts.
It'll be very interesting to see on Shane, and we really do break it down and get into the weeds and to how many plays and percentage of plays that Jalen Hurts ends up running the football. He did run it as much as he did in that Bears game before he got hurt. So that's what we're going to use as a comparison. And John's right. After the injury last year, the game against Washington, next to last week of the season, it ran it twice. Jalen Hurts should run it twice in the first 5 plays of almost any game, if you're asking me. But he did really cut back. Yeah, I just don't want to see 17 or 18 carries. So there is a comfortable number somewhere there in the middle. That's a pretty good gap we got working between Jalen's got a bum ankle, he can't run, and we need to have Jalen be the key figure on our offense. can Shane Steichen?
Now, that's a good question.
Find that middle ground.
What is more conducive to not running the ball, a bum ankle or a bum shoulder? I think the ankle would be the one that everybody just assumes, but you got to lower that shoulder a lot when you are getting ready to take that blow.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right, Mike. Not necessarily. I mean, that's why he didn't play last week. He was not clear for contact. So he could throw the football. That's not an issue. The issue was the contact part of it. And, and people are going to say, well, what does 1 week matter? Well, it matters a lot. There's a lot of history on that. Not a lot. It's kind of the AC joint is the more common injury. This is the SC, but grade 2 is 2 to 3 weeks. That's what the documentation shows, and that's where we are. So there is a point where you're a little bit better, but as players always say at this time of year, everybody's banged up, and Jalen Hurts is not going to be 100%. Can he play? Yes. Miles Sanders isn't 100%. He's got the knee brace on. We talked about Lane Johnson in the playoffs. He's going to play through it. He's going to try to play through it. Everybody's banged up this time of year. So it comes down to, how much you want to protect the player. And we're going to see. That's going to be an interesting part of this game plan to see how much Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen want to protect Jalen Hurts from taking that kind of contact. And kind of how quickly the Giants and we know Wink Martindale, he's blitzing, he's coming from the buses. But, another part of this is, Mike, the Giants shouldn't be playing this game. I mean, they got to play some players. I often people forget the COVID rules were still in effect last year. So when the Eagles sat everybody down, they did that wink, wink. Everybody got sick the same week. We're going to bring up 12 guys from the practice squad and put 12 people on the COVID list. You can't do that anymore. So you only have the 47 you can activate, and you can only have 2 practice squad elevations. You can't just do those wholesale changes. So certain players have to play, but they don't have to play the whole game. And if I'm the New York Giants, I'm not even playing this game. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's kind of where we are in the league now, is once you get to a certain spot you are locked into, now it's, hey, don't take a chance to get anybody hurt and pull everybody out. So, yeah, it would be surprising if the Giants go down that road. Or do they look at it and say, hey, we want to roll into the playoffs as the hot team, and we get matched up with Minnesota, and we think if we're playing our best football, we can go in there and win a game or two. Who knows what the thought is? I look back to Brian Daboll has coached with McDermott and Belichick. Belichick's all over the map, right? They played a Week 17 game against the Giants when they were trying to go undefeated. The Giants had nothing to play for in that game, played all their players, and that springboarded them into going to the Super Bowl. They got the confidence that they could beat the Patriots in that game, and then they went on to win the Super Bowl against the Patriots because they played Week 17 and said, hey, we could go toe-to-toe with this team. Does the Giants look at a team like the Eagles that they could see in the playoffs and say, hey, we're going to not only go toe-to-toe, we're going to beat you here, and that gives us confidence that we just beat the best team in the NFC? There are so many things. Now, McDermott, when he's been the coach, and Daboll was on that staff, they were all over the map. They played guys for a quarter. They pulled their starters. So you might see them pull their starters. I don't think there's any exact answer unless he comes out today, tomorrow, and says, we're not playing these guys. But I'd be pretty surprised if we don't see these guys for at least a little bit.
If he does, then he's going to take a phone call after the season from Nick Sirianni. What the hell were you thinking? How could you not play for a competitive advantage? Brian, shame on you. And I don't think we're going to get anything because that's what I think most NFL coaches would do. Not just Nick Sirianni, although he takes it to higher levels than anyone I've ever seen before. You're in a unique spot, Mike, in that your listening audience, even though longitudinally. Is that even a word? I think it is.
We just made it one.
I just did. Thank you for noticing. Where your station is located is actually south of Philadelphia, but you have a bigger New York contingent than like Philadelphia because there are people that come down the shore and come down to the casinos and the like. So I'm sure your phone lines have more New York callers than a Philadelphia station would. What is the buzz of the New York fans? If you got any buddies or if you had any callers, do they believe that they have caught lightning in a bottle here and that they can make a playoff run?
Well, yeah, our signal goes all the way up to like exit 90 on the Parkway. So we've got a pretty big audience up that way. I got to be honest, though, Monday I was not on the air. I've been sick. And yesterday with the Hamlin stuff, that kind of took over the show. So I will say this. I think the Giant fans, the last time the Eagles and Giants played, remember that game was 48-22. I mean, that game was not very competitive.
Yeah.
And at that time, this goes to show where, like, well, you beat this team 48-22, and yet now you're playing them again, and you're hoping that they don't play their starters so that you can win the game. You just blasted them 4 weeks ago, and that now you're not confident that you can beat the same team. So this goes into why the aesthetics of a win should not matter. You just crushed this team. In fact, it was maybe one of the more complete victories of the season. And here we are hoping that the Giants don't play their starters. The same guys you beat 48-22. That week, I think the Giant fans, and look, there was a time where I think the Giant fans understood. We've caught lightning in a bottle. We've got a good season. We've exceeded all expectations. Whatever we do from here is gravy. Well, now they have a chance to win 10 games if they win this game, right? They have a chance to win 10 games and go into the playoffs, something nobody thought was possible for this Giants team. So that's another reason why I think this game is kind of an interesting matchup for them on Sunday. Is that
I do think if you left it up to Brian Daboll, he'd play. He'd play to win. That's how coaches are. Sports have changed,
Big time.
2018, so the season after the Super Bowl, the double doink game in Chicago. Chicago was the really good team. And Matt Nagy at the time,
13-3.
coach, he had a decision to make in week 18. And he knew if he won that game, he was getting Philadelphia. And if he lost that game, he was getting, ironically, Minnesota, who was a much easier opponent, especially for Chicago, because they were a really physical team at the time. They had the great pass rush with Khalil Mack. Minnesota had the terrible offensive line. It was an easy decision for everybody else, but Matt Nagy went in and blitzed the Vikings because the styles didn't match up and the Bears were much better. And they blitzed them and they won the game. And all of a sudden they get the Eagles, who are coming off battle-tested, playoff-tested, Super Bowl champions, and they beat them. And Matt Nagy got killed for that. And maybe rightfully so. Maybe rightfully so. I don't know. Sports have changed. Ron Rivera got a lot of heat. I'm sure you saw, Mike, because he didn't know he could get eliminated. That's kind of the coach's mentality, though. He's worried about what he's doing. They got to win their game. The GM, if the GM steps in, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It says, Brian, look, we got a chance to beat a team that's going to be a player that starting a center that was on the street yesterday. They got to bring in a new center because all their centers are hurt. Don't you manipulate yourself to be in that position? I don't know.
I know coaching, you always, you could be in a scrimmage game, an exhibition, a preseason game, and the coach is probably like, I want to play to win this game 20 years ago. But I don't know where these new school coaches, have they evolved as well to say, don't care. Don't care if we win. Is not winning the game changing the mentality of the organization? There were times where people, Baltimore had that win streak in the preseason go. How many years in a row did they not lose a preseason game? And they were being lauded that, hey, that's their mentality, that even losing preseason games is unacceptable there. I guess each organization varies, but I will say for Ron Rivera to not know that, I would be pretty shocked because, you're down in Little League and the dad knows that if Joe's Pizza beats Phil's Barbershop, we're going to be the number 3 seed. If Ron Rivera didn't know what possibilities could happen for him to be eliminated, that's shocking.
Yeah, that's sort of like not knowing you could tie.
It may
or
be
if
shocking.
Somebody in the organization didn't tell him, hey, this is the scenarios this week, even if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
It may be shocking, but guess what? 2 Hail Marys, 2 Our Fathers, you are forgiven. The fact that he thought Carson Wentz gave him a better chance to make it to said playoffs, that's the one that you got to get up and lead the church. I'm sorry, Ron. I don't know that we can just let you do a couple of Our Fathers and Hail Marys and be forgiven for that one. That's what, and he's sticking with him. He's doubling down on. I have no problem with the decision to go with Carson Wentz. You watched the game, right? You were there on the sidelines, Coach. You saw how bad your quarterback was.
Well, the thought process was, Jody, that some people are insinuating that he didn't think they could be eliminated, so they wanted to see if Wentz could give them a spark, not knowing.
I hope that's not the case.
Yeah,
not knowing that they could have been eliminated. Meaning, in other words, we can't be eliminated. Let's see if he gives us a spark. If not, we can make a decision based on that. Now you stick with them because we made this trade. Let's see. Who knows at this point? Obviously, I think we've all seen now Wentz is not the guy. Heineke's not the guy. If anything, you play the kid Howell, who at one point people thought could have been the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
I don't think there's a more well-liked coach in this league than Ron Rivera, and he's going to be on the street. He's not going to make it through this. He's unfortunately going to be fired.
Which is not the worst thing in the world because he gets away from the whole Dan Snyder,
well, that's true.
Washington dumpster fire mess, and he probably
That's pretty surprising, though.
Years left on his contract, and he can land somewhere else. All right, Mike.
That's pretty surprising to hear, though.
Let me put this to you. Last question for mindset. The Eagles have lost 2 games in a row. All right, we know how the Dallas game went. Gardner Minshew filling in, no Jalen Hurts, a lot of offense. Defense for some reason took a pass on a game and made Dak Prescott look real good. And then a different outcome this week. Loss is a loss, but this week the offense is just completely non-existent. 4 straight 3-and-outs. So they've lost in varying ways, and they've lost 2 games in a row. So the overall vibe of this team has to at least be shaken. I'm not saying it's shattered, but it's at least shaken. How much does Jalen Hurts need to be under center just to center this team this week? That they need somebody to kind of grab this team by the neck and go, hey, we're 13-3. Yeah, we were 13-1, but we're still 13-3, and we've got the most important games yet to play. Jalen Hurts is a guy who can provide that. A quarterback usually does, and he's that type of quarterback and that type of leader on the team. How much do they need him just to grab the team by the scruff of the neck and say, boys, it's go time now. We can't be messing around. We can't give half-hearted effort like we have at times during both the last 2 games. How much is Jalen's leadership needed under center for this game Sunday against the Giants?
Well, I think we saw the last 2 weeks that it's needed. He's the guy for this team. That's who they look to. When the team in Chicago was not performing, he said, the hell with this. I'll take over the game myself, and ended up, carrying them. I think that was the most disappointing thing with Gardner Minshew is, look, Minshew is what he is. He played a great game last year with the Jets to the point that people wanted him to take over the job. Let's not forget that, right?
That was him and who else, really? 12 guys from
his dad and
Manny
there was a lot of Minshew
12
mania.
guys from Maniac.
There's a lot of Minshew mania people out there that thought that he was a better thrower, more accurate, and that the team would be better off with him. Well, then the next game he played, it didn't go all that well for him. That's who he is. But the thought is that Minshew, in his mind, I think thinks he's a starter, right? He went to Nick Sirianni and said, I want this job. Well, he didn't give any indication that he was up for that challenge in that game on Sunday. He looked like a deer in the headlights in that game on Sunday. He looked like he wanted no part of getting this team together and saying, guys, let's go. We're the Philadelphia Eagles. We've got to win this football game. So that, to me, is where Jalen Hurts obviously showed that when times were tough, he's able to kind of calibrate the thing, where Minshew just looked lost all day on Sunday. And that's just who he is. Is Minshew, if he plays on Sunday, is he going to be a dumpster fire? Probably not. He probably have a decent game again. He had a great game against Dallas. I thought he was very capable in that game. I mean, he made a couple, the interceptions. I think Quez Watkins probably could have helped him out a little bit. But you throw for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns, you at least competed. He didn't even compete on Sunday. He was not competitive with the way he played. So Jalen Hurts, there's no question, is a huge part of why this team is where they are. I think the more interesting thing will be Josh Sweat doesn't play. What happens there? You have Maddox out. You've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out. You're starting to take a couple nicks at all 3 levels of the ball on that side of the ball. Now, what does John Gannon do? Because I know he's public enemy number 1. Not by me, but by most.
Yeah, he always is public enemy number 1. We'll let you go, Mike. Struggling with those pipes, those legendary pipes. Hope you feel better. 97.3. You'll be on the air today, right? I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get 4 hours through with this thing here.
Mike, you're sounding just fine. Have a couple cups of tea, get a little nap in. We appreciate you jumping in with us each and every single Wednesday. Next week, it'll be the postseason Wednesday Mike Gill appearance here on Birds 365. Thanks for doing it today. That's Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash down the shore. Jeff Mosher of Inside the Eagles is going to join us coming up. Oh, Inside the Birds, excuse me. Going to join us.
Inside the Birds.
I got to remember to get the Mosher's podcast website. The name's kind of important. InsideTheBirds.com. Jeff Mosher's going to jump in a little over 20 minutes from now. All right, McMullen and McDonald, we're coming back.